Hello again, you lovely people. How the devil are you? Well, this is the first video of something I'm calling Running with My Mind. And the idea behind these videos is to talk about mental health and its connection with running. And over the series of videos I'm going to do, I'm going to be meeting up with friends, runners, people who have inspired me, people who I know have had their mental health challenges, and each video that person is going to pick a 5k route, and over that 5k run together we'll be talking about mental health, that person's journey, why that route is special, if it's special for them, why they got into running, how they got into running, a little bit about their background, and also talking about mental health and any mental health tips that they've got to help other people. We'll also be talking about running, and I'm going to ask every person that I run with to provide some running tips as well, just to help inspire other people. But this is the first video, and it seems only appropriate that video one is all about my journey with running, and also my mental health journey as well. Just to give you the heads up, this video will contain discussions around suicide and self-harm. So where do I start really? Well, I'm 47 years old. I'm a Geordie born and bred. I live in Ashford now. I love running. It's something that is now a very important part of my life. I think my earliest memory of running wasn't actually me running. It's my dad. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, growing up in Cramlington in Northumberland. He was a keen runner. I remember he always wore high-tech trainers. Like, they were the best things to have at the time. He used to run everywhere. And when I learned to ride my bike, I used to ride alongside him. We used to go for miles. And then in 1984, he did the Great North Run. He was my hero for doing that, because you only got to hear about the best athletes at the time. Your Steve Ovettes, your Seb Coes, your Steve Crams. There's another runner from the northeast, Charlie Spedden. He was one of the big names who used to do the Great North Run back then. And to be sat at the finish line in the grandstand waiting for my dad to cross the line, I just remember seeing him and just screaming my head off. I was his biggest fan that day. And I used to wear his Great North Run t-shirt all the time. I used to steal it when I got to be a teenager. It used to do his head in. I used to raid his wardrobe to get that t-shirt. It was my pride and joy, that. And I wish I knew where it was now. I really need to get hold of a 1984 Great North Run t-shirt. When I got to school, middle school in particular, they started doing cross country. And do you know what? I was alright. I wasn't the fastest, but I had a knack for just running. I never ever stopped. Once I started running, I just ran and ran, and I had a real knack for the sprint finish at the end. And I remember there was one lad, I got bullied at school from middle school right the way through to even into my sixth form years. And I remember one of the bullies, he he thought he was the thing, and he was trying to beat me one day in cross country, and he was being really cocky, and he went past me on the phone a little bit. We had to run around a football pitch, and I just bided my time, and I drafted him, just tailed him. And I remember he was looking over his shoulder the whole way. With about 100 metres left, I dinked left, and then I went right, and he didn't know what had hit him. I just left him in the dust. Oh, it was such a good feeling, that. And then into high school, got into orienteering, did alright at that, and eventually got picked to represent North East of England. I used to travel all over the UK, came 15th in the British Championships, and still carried on running. Did my first Great North Run, I think I was 17, I think that was when they allowed 16s and overs to do it. I know I was in the sixth form at the time, and I was hooked, but I never took it seriously. I never did the training. And I could never finish it without stopping, which is ironic really, but considering it cross country, I just used to run, but 13 miles was a lot. And if anyone's done the Great North Run, you know how hilly that is. And then once I graduated and I set up home, I carried on running, but it was only like, oh, do you know what, I fancy going for a run tonight, and I would do a couple of miles, and that was it. And I still did the Great North Run every few years, but never really didn't train for it. I took it for granted. I think I could do about 10k without stopping. It's only really been in recent years where I've taken me running seriously. There's more of that to come shortly. I mentioned before about being bullied at school. That bullying actually led to anxiety-related illnesses when I was about 13 years old, and I started skipping school because it was easier to skip school than face the bullies. And some of those feelings of insecurity, and I think that's where my imposter syndrome kicked in, because even when I was doing well with the orienteering and the cross country, the bullies always used to get in my head, keep telling me I was crap, that they were better than me, and I believed them. It was easy to believe them. But I think my earliest recollection of having problems, I think I was in my early 30s. I was in a stressful job. I wasn't in a particularly nice relationship. There was a lot of money pressures. I'd got made redundant eventually, and it was really hard to balance everything out. I actually went self-employed because I had a talent as a wedding photographer, still am, and I was in quite a toxic relationship as well, and I would think rely on alcohol just to numb it all. And I remember it was about 2015. I was at my friend's farm, which is one of my favourite places. It's one of my happy places to go to. It's peaceful. And I just remember sitting in this conservatory feeling like the walls were caving in on me. And I had a panic attack. And that was the first of many over several months. And it wasn't a nice feeling. And I honestly didn't know what to do. And it kept consuming me. When you don't know what to do and you've got no one to turn to, and back then mental health was very much a stigma, especially in men. I just retreated into my shell. And people took advantage of that in many different ways, and it got too much for me. And I remember sitting at a chair on top of a cliff in Tynemouth in the November, thinking, do you know what, it'd be easier just to jump. But I've got a photo of my kids on my phone as my wallpaper, and I just kept thinking of them, and that pulled me back. And eventually I decided to go and get help. So in the November of 2015 I went to my doctors, and that took a lot of courage for me to do. I just remember sitting with a notebook at my doctor's desk, and I dismissed everything straight away. I was like, I'm totally wasting your time here, so I'm really sorry, because I know there's people more deserving of your time. And I just opened my notebook and just let rip. I remember bursting into tears, and that relief has never felt so strong. And she actually was brilliant, because she took the time, she didn't hurry me, and she did a lot of things that stay with me today. Some of the advice she gave, she also referred me to a therapist. She put me on sertraline. Over the coming 7 or 8 months, I started my therapy. That revealed a lot of things, and a lot of techniques, but also brought home some real home truths. And I made some decisions in my life. Some were good, some were rash, some I regret, but they all led me to where I am today. Some of those decisions I'm not proud of, but I had to do it for the greater good. If I could do it all again, I'd probably do some of them differently. So I decided to remove myself from the toxic atmosphere I was in. It meant leaving my kids, and that was the hardest part of it all. But for their own well-being, I didn't want them living in a toxic environment anymore. Now, unfortunately, somebody took advantage of my fragile mental state, and I stupidly went along with that. And the following 3 years were nothing short of a nightmare. In 2019, I reached rock bottom. I was surviving on a daily diet of lack of sleep, poor health, poor diet, stressful job, a really bad relationship, a really tough environment to live in, and alcohol. And it was a vicious circle that just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And in the first 6 months of 2019, I was fighting a daily urge on my commute to work to throw myself in front of a train. So when you're fighting that urge, you're exhausted by the time you get to work, you're exhausted by the time you get home. And eventually I snapped. And at the beginning of April 2019, when I removed myself from that environment, I felt nothing but shame and embarrassment. So I sat in a hotel room with a box of pills and a bottle of vodka. Yeah. Thankfully, I had a guardian angel looking over me that day. Next thing I knew, I was in A&E. My life was saved. stupidly, I didn't talk to anyone. Well, I did try to talk to people, but they dismissed my anxiety and fears and depression. And this is where the two parts of my life came together: my running life and my mental health life. Feeling like I'd lost everything, I set about running again. I was massively overweight. I was unfit, massively unfit. And I used running as a way to get myself sorted. And I set myself a target. I set myself a challenge. And it was actually one of my friends, Paul. He had gone through some really tough days earlier on in 2019 himself, and he was a massive source of inspiration and help for me. And he went, I'll tell you what you need to do. You need to do one of your crazy charity challenges. And that's what I did. I set myself a charity challenge in the hope of raising money for campaign against living miserably, but also to help my own mental health. So I decided to run the length of the district line from Richmond to Upminster. I did it. Again, I wasn't taking it seriously. I didn't take my running seriously. It was just something I did on the spur of the moment. I think the most I did in my training was 6 miles. I had to do 36 miles to run that line. It damn near killed me, but it was a start. Then the pandemic came along, and that was tough mentally. Dealing with that isolation, living apart from my kids, 400 miles away from my kids, and really feeling that I had a social responsibility not to travel. I isolated myself for 6 months, and rather than walking, I ran. And at the time, I could barely run 5k. That's how badly I'd got unfit. And my target during lockdown was to run 5k. My obesity and overweightness, if that's such a phrase, really was an issue. So when I eventually set up home after the pandemic, I moved here to Ashford. It's got its faults, but for me, it's home. And it's got everything I need. But the problem was, I only knew a few people in the area. For someone who has hated the isolation of lockdown, yeah, that was a bit of a problem. So how do I get around that? So I moved to Ashford in June, or at the end of June 2021. And in July 2021, the government lifted the restrictions on parkrun. And I saw that as my opportunity. And I couldn't do the first parkrun back because I was visiting my kids. But on the 31st of July 2021, I nervously arrived here at Victoria Park in Ashford to take part in my first parkrun. Now, all the experiences I'd had before had resulted in me having really bad social anxiety, so the thought of turning up in a big group of people that I didn't know, in a place that I didn't really know, put the fear of God into me. But when I got to the finish line where everyone congregated before the start, I spotted somebody in a West Ham shirt. Now, yes, I'm a Geordie, but I support West Ham. And there's a certain connection all West Ham supporters have. So I made a beeline for him. I went, hello, I'm new here, don't know what I'm doing. This is my first parkrun. I've forgotten who it was, I wish I could remember, but that person told me everything I needed to know about parkrun. thankfully I remembered my barcode. I remember the newcomers briefing. Terry, Mr. Parkrun himself in Ashford, was doing the parkrun briefing that day, and that stayed with me. And he's played a big part in my running life here in Ashford as well. Now, for one reason or another, it took me another year before I did my second parkrun. But after that second one, I was hooked. And I got to know people. I got to see the familiar faces. I became a familiar face. And I started taking my running more seriously. I even entered a race, something I hadn't done for years. And I could see different clubs. Here I could see the Bacon Butty Brigade, Ashford Striders, Ashford and District, Curious Runners, Vegan Runners. There were loads and loads of them. And there was one run I did in the February of 2023. I was on the parkrun and Terry was running next to me, and he gave me so much encouragement around that when I didn't have any belief in myself. And the same one, I spoke to Sarah and Don from Ashford Striders, and that was me. I was hooked. A week later I got my red t-shirt and I was a strider. Within a year I was a run leader, and my running has come on leaps and bounds in 18 months since then. I've also joined 40 Runs because they've got national satellites all over the UK for when I'm travelling around, which is great, and it gives another option for my running. But with Ashford Striders, I've developed such a big network of friends and people that I could speak to, people I could go to if I was just feeling a bit and when I've needed to be alone, they've left me alone. And when I've needed a crowd of people around me, there's been people around me. And the encouragement I've found that the running community provides itself, you know, it's one big family. And I've got such a close-knit group of friends now as a result of all of this. Life's good. Yes, I've had an injury for the past year and a bit, which has driven me insane. But what a difference my life is as a result of running. So my proudest moment as a runner, that's easy. June the 16th, 2012, Riding Mill in Northumberland, 1500 metres along the main road, running with the Olympic torch. In the pouring rain, on a slippy road surface with a broken hand, somehow I managed not to drop the torch. That actually happened for the first time the day after I did it. But that still sends hairs on the back of my neck. It was actually a really tough run as well because there was a steep hill coming out of Riding Hill that I had to run up. It was, and the torch was really heavy as well. But yeah, that was my proudest moment. If I could give you one tip as a runner, don't compare yourself to other people. I'm guilty of that. Messes with your head. Run your race. Forget distance. Go with time. Set yourself a time target and just increase it. But you don't have to do 1,000,000 miles an hour all the time. I love doing slow runs, and I run further and faster as a result of them. So yeah, that's my one big tip. My big mental health tip: never be afraid to talk to people. Never ever be afraid to reach out to people. I've got a I've got a WhatsApp group of friends that I know that all I have to do is say help and they are there for me, whether they're close by or at the other end of the country. WhatsApp is an amazing way of helping you deal with issues in your life, dealing with those moments of insecurity, those moments when you're feeling low, those moments when you just need someone. Just talk to people. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this, and just remember, if you liked it, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and share with your friends. See you soon.